Welcome to our On the Dyno series. I'm Bob Morreale, your host, and today we're going to be discussing what is Spark Advance and why is it different amongst different engines. So let's go ahead and get started. To my left here, I have a GM LS engine. Everybody loves LS engines, right? Sure, but there's always this problem of what is this Spark Advance that I should be setting it to? My tuner says this, I read that on the forums. Well, first, what exactly is Spark Advance? Spark Advance means how far in advance of top dead center does my piston need to be at before I light the fuel to push down on that piston. So it's always a balancing act. What that means is, if I wait until the piston gets all the way to the top and then I light the fire and it pushes down, the piston's already on its way down. And then as the explosion happens from that gasoline burning, it's chasing that piston down, which means not great power, which is why it's kind of tricky. It's kind of like tossing a ball up and then trying to hit it with a baseball bat. You got to get that timing just right. So as the piston is actually still on its way up in advance of top dead center, like on an LS, maybe 20, 25 degrees in advance, we light the flame. Why? Because it takes time for the gasoline to propagate or start burning so that when it flashes and pushes down on that piston, it's at just the perfect time to push down with all of its force. If you wait too long, the piston's already on its way down. If you do it too early, the piston's still on its way up and it fights it. Sometimes if you're tuning a car, you'll hear it. It'll rattle. It'll sound bad. People, older people, might say the valves are rattling or something like that. But here's the thing. Spark Advance has to be perfected. We teach a process where you don't just go straight to the end that you think it's at. We teach you to creep up on it. So when you learn at the tuning school, we say, hey, why don't you start at maybe 10 or 15 degrees and add 2 degrees at a time and test it and test it and test it until you have found peak power with no knock. Now that's a different video entirely, but knock is a bad thing. You don't want it. So here's the deal. Why would it be different amongst different engines? And let's say they're running the same fuel just to keep everything equal. Well, this GM LS engine was designed in the 2000s, right? Probably, maybe the late 90s, depending on what you have. But here's the deal. The design of the combustion chamber, which is the area that the piston interfaces with, is way superior to an old engine. So an LS, naturally aspirated, might like, say, 23 degrees of Spark Advance at full throttle. That's the perfect time. It's the fuel will ignite, push down perfectly, and there's no knock. Let's just say it's 23 degrees. That's probably a good average for a lot of your LS engines that are naturally aspirated. But let's say you have the same fuel, but instead of a GM LS engine, you've got this old big block Chevy over here. Bear with me. All right, guys, hang tight. I've got to drag this boat anchor over here. 1968. Big block, 396, 325 horsepower engine. Wow, this is why we call them boat anchors, right, guys? All the younger folks are calling them boat anchors because they're 5,000 pounds, they're all cast iron. But how is that relative? Well, these are your cylinder heads. Right under this valve cover are your cylinder heads. And then down in the block is the piston that I was referring to, and you've got 8 of them going up and down. Here's the problem. This is made of cast iron, and the combustion chamber design is 1960s design. Was it good for its time? Sure. But was it very efficient? Not really. So you have an engine here that needs 36 degrees or 33 degrees of Spark Advance to be optimized for this engine to push down on that piston, to ignite that fuel. Why? It's got to do with the material it's made of, the design of the combustion chamber, the design of the piston top, and a whole bunch of other stuff that has to do with airflow in here that we're not getting into. But here's the deal. It doesn't matter what you have. GM LS, big block Chevy from the 60s, 10 degrees different Spark Advance numbers. It doesn't really matter. What really matters is that you are a good tuner, or you know someone that's a good tuner, and they don't cut right to the chase and go, that's supposed to take 36, we're going to start there, and we're going to go up. Why? That leads to explosions, and we don't like that. It needs to be whatever this engine likes, because the fuel might be different across the engines, the design might be different, it might be a 4-cylinder, it might be an 8-cylinder, doesn't matter. Whole thing, guys, is it doesn't really matter. The only thing that really matters is that you know how to do a good job tuning, and you actually figure out what the best Spark Advance is for each of these engines as you go. That's all we got time for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.